Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to be learning about copyright. So, the title of this presentation is called Understanding Copyright. All right, so we're going to be learning about copyright, public domain, plagiarism, and fair use. Okay, first I want you to show me what you know. So, we're going to start with this anticipation guide, and you're going to see some questions, and then you're going to see true false. So you're just going to answer honestly. If you don't know the answer, just take your best guess. The first one says, it is okay to copy a poem written by someone else and change a few words to make it your own. True or false? Number two, it is okay to use public domain work in any way you want to. True or false? Number three, it is okay to use someone else's work in my project if I give them credit for using their work. True or false? Number four, teachers and students can use parts of copyrighted materials because of fair use. True or false? Number five, if the copyright of a book expires, it can be used. True or false? So these are some of the things that we're going to be learning about today. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to tell me some of these answers. Okay, so did you know that when you create an original work, you can decide who can make copies of it, who can distribute the copies, where it can be displayed. So if you draw a picture or take a photograph, you can decide if someone can display the work in public or perform the work, like if it is a dance that you created. What is copyright? So first we're going to learn about what copyright is. When you're doing a research project, you might need to use someone else's words, pictures, or music. Even if you paraphrase another author's words, you must give them credit for using it because they own the copyright. What is copyright? It is a form of protection given to the author or creator of an original work. These works can include literary works like books, journal articles, and web pages. They can be dramatic like plays or music, art, or even scientific works. This means that the creator of a work owns the work they created. And so if you want to use any part of their work, such as words, pictures, or music, you must give them credit. But did you know that if you want to use someone's whole work, you must have permission? So if you use a little piece of their work and you give them credit for it, that's okay. But you can't use their whole work, like a whole song or a whole article in your research. Did you also know that you just can't copy and paste someone else's words from a book or a web page? So let's say I'm doing a project and I want to use a piece of someone's web page where I found this really great example. I can't just copy and paste it. I can give them credit for it and then I can use it. That it's breaking the law. The law is called the Copyright Act of 1976. And then you must give credit by citing or telling where it came from. So like I said in the first one, if I copy and paste a picture or a photo or some words that I want to use in my project, I have to cite them, which means I tell where it came from. This is a copyright symbol. So when you see this symbol, it means that it is copyrighted. You don't need to have the symbol, but it's always a good idea to add one to your work with the year and your name. So like if you look at this little example, it says copyright and then it has a symbol, 1971 by John Updike. What kinds of works can be copyrighted? So dances that have been performed, music, computer programs and games, literary works such as books, magazines, web content, photos that people take, architectural works. So, like if you plan a building or making a building or a school, those can be copyrighted. And also artwork. It's not on here, but artwork is also um, a type of work that can be copyrighted. What kind of works can't be copyrighted? Ideas. If I have an idea in my head, I can't just say, oh, it was copyrighted just because, I might have shared it with somebody and somebody else might have heard it and then they take it and they use it as their own. Well, it's not copyrighted. Recipes. So if I write down a recipe or if it's in a recipe book, those are not copyrighted. Government publications, and then clothing and fashion. So if I design a dress, I can't copyright my dress. So anybody could potentially say it was theirs. Where do you find copyrighted information? In a book, it's going to be on a copyright page. And like the little example, usually you'll see copyright and you'll see the little symbol, and then there's the date and the person who copyrighted it. On a web page, it's going to be at the bottom of the web page. So if you go to any web page and you scroll all the way down, usually it'll say copyrighted, it'll have the little symbol, and it'll say 2023, and it might or it might not tell you who the copyright, who owns the copyright. Does copyright expire? Any material copyrighted after the year 1978 is protected from the time it was created until 70 years after the death of the person who created. So like if we were reading a book by one of the authors who is still alive, their copyright would not expire until 70 years after they died. So let's say an author died in 1920. Well, then 70 years would be 1990. And so that means that the copyright is expired. But if an author died in the year 2000, the copyright on whatever is copyrighted would not expire until 2070. And then for materials created before 1978, you need to check the copyright rules because they might be different for some things. Now we'll talk about public domain. Public domain means that when copyright expires, it becomes public domain. And that means that anyone can use public domain without permission. So, for example, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, this book is public domain. So if I went through the book and I wanted to use pictures from inside the book, I could use any of the pictures that were inside because they are public domain. But I cannot use images from the movie because it's not. Can you guess why? Well, probably because the author is still alive, or it hasn't been 70 years since the author died. Okay, so just remember that. Let's talk a little bit about plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism happens when someone copies another person's words or writing and pretends that it belongs to them. So, like I said earlier, if I was doing some research or I was writing an essay and I found this really great piece from a book that I wanted to use, and I just said, I'm just going to copy and paste it, and I put it in to my essay, that's plagiarism because it doesn't belong to me, but I am passing it off as mine. So examples of plagiarism: changing words and sentence order. Just because like earlier I mentioned, I I had to write a poem, but I had no idea what I wanted to write. So I find this really cool poem, and maybe I change a few words. Like it talked about a red rose, and I change it to a blue carnation, and I still use most of the words. That is plagiarism. Buying an essay or having someone else write an essay for you. So if I go online and I look for an essay on um, the Korean War, and I buy it and I turn it in to my teacher, that's plagiarism. Or I tell my brother, hey, I'll pay you $20 if you write my essay for me. And he writes it for me, and then I turn it in. That's plagiarism. Using too many quotes or using too much of the original work. Later, we'll be learning how to cite our sources, but there's a couple of ways you can use other people's work without it being plagiarism. But if you use too much of their work, then it becomes plagiarism. Citing sources that you did not use. So let's say I only use 2 sources, but my teacher told me I had to use 5, and I just throw some in there and I didn't really use them. That's plagiarism. Using a part of someone's work and not giving them credit. Let's talk a little bit about fair use. What is fair use? Fair use is the idea that it is okay for a person to reuse something that another person has created in certain amounts and for certain purposes without breaking the law. Teachers and students can use examples of fair use. Teachers and students can use small pieces of copyrighted materials, text, music, pictures, if it is being used for school purposes and not making money off of it. For making fun of something like a parody like Saturday Night Live. They do that a lot. So if I go and I take the book that we're reading, I take Freak the Mighty, for example, and I make a photocopy of 2 pages because I want to teach a lesson from those 2 pages, but I want you to have them in front of you. That's fair use. I can use a small piece of it because it's being used for learning purposes. And so that's the end of our lesson today. We're going to be talking a little bit more about citing sources, and we're going to be talking about how not to plagiarize, how to paraphrase, and how to use quotations. And so this was just a little bit to give you. Now I'm going to give you your activity that you're going to do so we can see how much your brain grew and how much you learned.